Okay, so solve by using the square root method. You may have to go back to last chapter to figure out how to complete the square. But let's go for x squared minus 4 equals 0. So we could factor the left-hand side by differences of squares, x plus 2x minus 2, and then set our factors equal to 0 separately and solve, as we've done in the notes directly below. But let's just add 4 to both sides. So x squared equals 4. Then we can square root both sides. Square root, x equals, the square root of 4 is plus or minus 2. And that's our answer. Okay, off to the right. X minus 2 all squared minus 1 equals 0. Well, we want to isolate the squared before we square root both sides. So we have to add 1 to both sides. So x minus 2 all squared equals 1. Square root both sides. X minus 2, the value of something square rooted squared, is itself. And the right-hand side, the square root of positive 1 is plus or minus 1. Two equations side by side. X minus 2 equals positive 1, and x minus 2 equals negative 1. Taking these things from above and separating them. So if we add 2 to both sides, we're going to get x equals 3, circle your answer, and x equals 1, circle your answer. Again, put your answers back into the questions to make sure they're correct. Now, a couple of does not exist cases. If you get something like, for example, x squared plus 16 equals 0, and you do some algebra like subtracting 16 from both sides and you get negative 16, you try and square root both sides, but you can't square root a negative, so it does not exist, no solution or whichever. If you ever do any algebra to ever get something squared equaling negative, no solution or no x-intercepts or no of whatever you're looking for. So again, let's start with another one in vertex form. 2 open bracket, x plus 1 close bracket, squared minus 8 equals 0. So this one I haven't done an alternate solution like I did the two above in the two boxes. Either way, let's add 8 to both sides. So we can add 8, we can cross off the 8 and cross off the 0, put a positive 8 there. That was easy. Let's rewrite it. 2 open bracket, x plus 1 close bracket squared equals 8. We just added 8 to both sides. Now we have to divide both sides by 2. So x plus 1 all squared equals 4 divided by 2. 8 divided by 2 is 4. Then we're going to square root both sides. So x plus 1 equals plus or minus 2. Two equations side by side. X plus 1 equals positive 2. X plus 1 equals negative 2. 1 for the positive, 1 for the negative. Subtract 1 from both sides for both. X equals, subtracting 1, 2 minus 1 is 1. Circle your answer. And then if we subtract, excuse me, that should say 2. That should say 2. I'm going to erase the equation above. X plus 1 equals negative 1. And it should have been, I'm going to do it in red. X plus 1 equals negative 2, excuse me. So if we minus 1 from both sides of that one, we get x equals negative 3. Usually the notes are going to be right. Sometimes I make an error because I'm going back and forth and whatnot. So there's that. Two answers, check your answer. Do it a different way. FOIL it out. Put it in your graphing calculator. Find the x-intercepts, etc. Okay, x minus 2 all squared minus 7 equals 0. So we can add 7 to both sides. So x minus 2 all squared equals 7. Now we can square root both sides. So x minus 2 equals plus minus. We can't root 7, so plus minus root 7. Now if we add 2 to both sides, we get x equals plus minus root 7. And then we added 2 to both sides, so plus 2. We added 2 to both sides, so plus 2. Final answer. Write them as two separates. So these further 5 questions, let me just grab them. So these further 5 questions in the notes. We talked about this one at the top left and did an alternate. We talked about this one in the top middle and did an alternate. We learned that we can't, well, square roots can't equal negatives, so it does not exist. We then did this example, learning how to divide by the coefficient. We then looked at this example where we actually have roots in the answer. So further, let's go down the page. Your answers might be decimals. Bottom middle, you may have crazy roots. Bottom right, you might have crazy roots. Middle right, you might have semi-crazy roots. These are all doing the same method. Get it equal to 0 by completing the square, then use the square root method. Do BEDMAS backwards, add or subtract, multiply or divide, then square root both sides. Separate it into two answers, and possibly have to work with a whole bunch of square root rules. Either way, always pick an x value, put it into the question, pick an x value, put it into the answer, make sure that it's correct, etc. Or take these x values, put them back in for x, and make sure it's equal to 0. Okay, so that's solving by using the square root method. So far we've got solving by factoring and solving by using the square root method.